So let's start. As you know, our method is reading. Everybody read a little bit. So today, after our sutta, we discussed sutta number 148, Chakka sutta, the 6 sets of 6 from Majjhima Nikaya. So let's read a little bit, everybody. Then while you are reading, if I want to stop, I will stop and then explain. Otherwise, after reading, I will stop. I will explain wherever necessary. That is how we do. Okay. So who is going to read first? Suddhaswa, yeah.
Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Savatthi in Jeta's Grove, Anatha Pindika's park. There he addressed the Bhikkhus thus: Bhikkhus, Venerable Sir, they replied. The Blessed One said this: Bhikkhus, I shall teach you the Dhamma that is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, with the right meaning and phrasing. I shall reveal a holy life that is utterly perfect and pure, that is, the 6 sets of 6. Listen and attend closely to what I shall say. Yes, Venerable Sir, the Bhikkhus replied.
Okay. Now, the beginning, most discourses, you know that when the Buddha taught this Dhamma, thus have I heard. This part was taught by Venerable Ananda, as for the vessel of the 3 months after of the Buddha. The monks, 500 monks, got together and they rehearsed the Dhamma. When Venerable Mahakassapa asked where the Buddha taught this Dhamma, then he said, thus have I heard. This is how I have heard of this. So that part is easier, and the place is almost frequently you find the same place: Savatthi, Jeta's Grove, Anatha Pindika's park. So the second paragraph is very important. This is how the Buddha said. The first paragraph is the history of it. That's how it was recorded in the Buddhist scriptures. So this is how the Buddha starts the sutta. Buddha addressing the monks says, Bhikkhus, I shall teach you the Dhamma that is good in the beginning, good in the middle, good in the end. So this is I shall teach you the Dhamma. This is very quite different from other discourses. Simply the Buddha start to teach the Dhamma, but here I am going to teach the Dhamma. He emphasizes this. I am going to teach the Dhamma. Dhamma, which is now the Buddha explained what Dhamma is. I am going to teach you which Dhamma. Dhamma which is good in the beginning. We sometimes we use the term excellent. Good is the translation here is good. Sometimes we use the word excellent in the beginning, excellent in the middle, excellent in the end. What is the beginning, what is the middle, and what is the end? We have to understand these 3. When you say, in Pali it is said, Adi Kalyana, Kalyana, Majje Kalyana, Pariyasana Kalyana. Good in the beginning means Seela. Beginning is Seela. In this sasana, in this dispensation, whenever you find the phrase Adi Kalyanam, Majja Kalyanam, Pariyasana Kalyanam, Adi is Seela. Seela is good. Then middle is Samadhi. And end is Panya. Adi Kalyana, Madhya Kalyana, Pariyasana Kalyana means that. So, and this Dhamma, further, the Buddha says, with the right meaning and right praising. So that is why this Dhamma is called Suakhato Dhammo. Suakhato Bhagavata Dhammo. Suakhata means well expounded. Well expounded means expounded with right meaning, clear meaning, no confusion in the teaching of the Buddha. So, right meaning and right praising. I shall reveal a holy life. Holy life is Brahmacharya. Holy life, the Pali term is Brahmacharya. I shall reveal a holy life that is utterly perfect and pure. Perfect and pure Dhamma. It's very clear Dhamma. That's the meaning. So, what is that Dhamma? That is the 6 sets of 6. Friends, this is the most important discourse to understand Vipassana. This is Vipassana, purely Vipassana. That is why it is called utterly perfect and pure. Why it is pure? It is Vipassana, pure Dhamma. No mixed, no many other different things. Clearly focusing to Vipassana. Listen and attend closely to what I shall say. Yes, Venerable Sir, the bhikkhus replied. So that is the beginning. Now let's understand the synopsis. Can you continue the same?
The Blessed One said this: the 6 internal bases should be understood. The 6 external bases should be understood. The 6 classes of consciousness should be understood. The 6 classes of contact should be understood. The 6 classes of feeling should be understood. The 6 classes of craving should be understood.
This is the gist of the sutta, synopsis. The 6 internal bases should be understood. There are 6 bases internally. The 6 external bases should be understood. Then 6 classes of consciousness should be understood. Then the 6 classes of contact should be understood. Then the 6 classes of feeling should be understood. Then the 6 classes of craving should be understood. 6 sets of 6. That is how the Buddha introduced the 6 sets of 6. So if you have any questions, you can ask, okay? Panya, should you please join?
The 6 internal bases should be understood. So it was said, and with reference to what was this said, there are the eye base, the ear base, the nose base, the tongue base, the body base, and the mind base. So it was with reference to this that it was said, the 6 internal bases should be understood. This is the first set of 6. The 6 external bases should be understood. So it was said, and with reference to what was this said, there are the form base, the sound base, the odor base, the flavor base, the tangible base, and the mind object base. So it was with reference to this that it was said, the 6 external bases should be understood. This is the second set of 6.
Yeah, continue.
The 6 classes of consciousness should be understood. So it was said, and with reference to what was it said, dependent on the eye and forms, eye consciousness arises. Dependent on the ear and sounds, ear consciousness arises. Dependent on the nose and odors, nose consciousness arises. Dependent on the tongue and flavors, tongue consciousness arises. Dependent on the body and tangibles, body consciousness arises. Dependent on the mind and mind objects, mind consciousness arises. So it was with reference to this that it was said, the 6 classes of consciousness should be understood. This is the third set of 6. The 6 classes of contact should be understood. So it was said, and with reference to what was this said, dependent on the eye and forms, eye consciousness arises. The meaning of the 3 is contact. Dependent on the ear and sounds, ear consciousness arises. The meaning of the 3 is contact. Dependent on the nose and odors, nose consciousness arises. The meaning of the 3 is contact. Dependent on the tongue and flavors, tongue consciousness arises. The meaning of the 3 is contact. Dependent on the body and tangibles, body consciousness arises. The meaning of the 3 is contact. dependent on the mind and mind objects. Mind consciousness arises. The meaning of the three is contact. So it was with reference to this that it was said, the 6 classes of contact should be understood. This is the 4th set of 6.
Okay. So now, here the Buddha explains the internal basis, external basis, and then consciousness. As there are two things matter, internal base and external base, then there arises consciousness. Consciousness arises in the I, internal base. Consciousness arises there. Then only one can see the external base. So, in order to see things, there is a process. That process is together with the concomitant factors, the other factors like feeling, perception. Perception takes place. Eventually, perception takes place. So, internal base, external base, and consciousness. So then these come together. Meeting of the three is called contact. That is the most important place to understand. If we are mindful at the time of contact, then we can change this process either to the good side or bad side. If we are mindful, we can change it to the good side, of course, to panya, to wisdom. Otherwise, what happens? We end up with either craving or repulsion or delusion. These three. So this is why it is important. Yes.
Is that where the right effort comes in? Right at that point?
Right effort should be made at that point. Then only we can understand it. If we have no right effort, we simply end up with craving,
and
grasp.
That's the definition of right effort in that instance. Boom. Okay, to discern whether it's wholesome or unwholesome.
Wholesome or unwholesome. Right.
Should I continue?
Huh?
Should I continue reading?
Chivaka.
Number 8.
8.
The 6 classes of feeling should be understood. So was said, and with reference to what was said, dependent on the I forms, I consciousness arises. The meaning of the 3 is contact. The contact of condition there is feeling. Dependent on the air and sound, ear consciousness arises. The meaning of the 3 is contact. The contact of condition there is feeling. Dependent on the nose and odor, nose consciousness arises. The meaning of the 3 is contact. With contact of condition there is feeling. Dependent on the tongue and the flavors, tongue consciousness arises. The meaning of the 3 is contact. With contact condition there is feeling. Dependent on the body and tangible, body consciousness arises. The meaning of the 3 is contact. With contact of condition there is feeling. Dependent on the mind and mind object, mind consciousness arises. The meaning of the 3 is contact. With contact of condition there is feeling. So it was with reference to this that it was said, the 6 classes of feeling should be understood. This is the 5th set of 6.
So that is how feeling arises. Feeling arises because of contact. Contact is important because feeling arises because of contact, perception arises because of contact, and volitional formations arise because of contact. That is why I said that it is the most important place. The 3. If we can understand contact at the time of contact, we can understand perception, we can understand feeling, and our thought, volitional formations. So that is why it is important.
Is it usually given as like a, maybe I misunderstand it, as a chain of actions? So there's the contact, and then there's the perception, and then feeling, and then volitional formations? Are they linked as a chain, or do they kind of arise simultaneously?
All together. We can't separate even. We can't separate this because all these are mental, All these are mental. These are inseparable, though distinguishable.
So when it's usually the order that it's usually given doesn't mean that they're sequential. It's not to mean that.
Yeah, there is a sequence. That is sequential. That's true.
But so in this sequence, perception and volitional formations are left out here in this set of 6.
Yeah, perception takes place after contact.
But it's not mentioned.
It is not mentioned here because in this sutta the Buddha wants to explain 6 sets of 6. In other discourses like Madhupindika Sutta, honey bowl, the Buddha says Chakkuncha paticca rupecha uppajjicha chakku viññāna tinnang sangati passo. Meeting of the 3 is contact. Tinnang sangati passo. Passa pacca vedana. Depending on contact, feeling arises. Passa pacca vedana. Yang vedeti tang sanjanati. Yang vedeti. What one feels, then one perceives. Vedana pacca yang vedeti tang sanjanati. What one feels, one perceives. That is how the Buddha said. This point, some people twisted this. Some people twist this and say that it's the other way around. Perception takes place before feelings. Some people misunderstand that. But we have to go with the sutta, with the teaching of the Buddha, not mere speculation. Okay. Jivaka, could you please read the next paragraph also? No. Yeah.
The 6 classes of craving should be understood. So it was said, with reference to what was just said, dependent on the I forms, I consciousness arises. The meeting of the 3 is contact. With contact as condition, there is feeling. With feeling as condition, there is craving. Dependent on the ear and sounds, ear consciousness arises. With feeling as condition, there is craving. Dependent on the nose and odors, nose consciousness arises. With feeling as condition, there is craving. Dependent on the tongue and flavors, tongue consciousness arises. With feeling as condition, there is craving. Dependent on the body and tangible, body consciousness arises. With feeling as condition, there is craving. Dependent on the mind and mind object, mind consciousness arises. The meaning of the 3 is contact. With contact as condition, there is feeling. With feeling as condition, there is craving. So it was with reference to this that it was said, the 6 classes of craving should be understood. This is the 6th set of 6.
Okay. So those are the 6 sets of 6. Now, craving arises because of feeling. Here we to understand now, perception takes place at the end. At the end of this, like that's when you see something, that's you perceive. When you see, then you grasp it. Craving and form. Then the form, actually we see the form at the end. The internal basis and external basis. Internal basis should be, Buddha said, internal basis should be understood. And then the external basis should be understood. So, external basis cannot be understood. We cannot understand external base, the form, we cannot understand form without understanding the process. I mean, all other factors are within the I and the form. Other factors take place within the I and the form. When you see an object, when you see the object, in order to see the object, you have to have this process. You have to have the form and the I, then consciousness and contact, then feeling. Then only you can see it.
In the sense of recognizing.
Recognizing.
Okay.
That is what is perception. That is how perception takes place. So, it's clear, right? Shall we go to next Dhamma? Can you read?
Yes. If anyone says the I is self, that is not tenable. The rise and fall of the I are discerned, and since its rise and fall are discerned, it would follow myself rises and falls. That is why it is not tenable for anyone to say the I is self. Thus the I is not self. If anyone says forms are self, so forth, that is why it is not tenable for anyone to say forms are self. Thus the I is not self, forms are not self. If anyone says I consciousness is self, that is why it is not tenable for anyone to say I consciousness is self. Thus the I is not self, forms are not self, I consciousness is not self. If anyone says I contact is self, that is why it is not tenable for anyone to say I contact is self. Thus the I is not self, forms are not self, I consciousness is not self, I contact is not self. If anyone says feeling is self, that is why it is not tenable for anyone to say feeling is self. Thus the I is not self, forms are not self, I consciousness is not self, I contact is not self, feeling is not self. If anyone says craving is self, that is why it is not tenable for anyone to say craving is self. Thus the I is not self, forms are not self, I consciousness is not self, I contact is not self, feeling is not self, craving is not self.
So, now the purpose of introducing these sets of six is this. The purpose is to understand that there is no self in any one of these. There is no self. There is nothing permanent, nothing unchanging, entity, substance here within these six sets of six. Now the Buddha says, if anyone says the I is self, that is not tenable. It never happened. It never happened. No upapajjati. The rise and fall of the I are discerned, and since its rise and fall are discerned, it would follow myself arises and falls. This is what happened. Now people, when something is changing, when the I is changing, the people know that. So they have the idea that my I has the rising and falling, that changing nature is there. So since we have that change in nature, we think that we have that idea that it is changing. So it is not permanent. So myself rises and falls. That is why it is not tenable. The Buddha says that is why it is not tenable for anyone to say the I is self. Thus the I is not self. I is not self. Now the Buddha clearly said there is no such thing in the I. Then the form of the six sets, then Buddha says the form, take the form. If anyone says forms are self, that is also not tenable. That is why it is not tenable for anyone to say forms are self. Thus the I is not self, forms are not self. I is not self, forms are not self. If anyone says I consciousness is self, so now somebody we can think of these 6 sets, all these 6. Like if the self is not in the I, that may be in forms. Oh, then the Buddha said, no, there is no such thing in the I or the form. Then one might think that maybe then in consciousness or contact or in feelings or in craving. So the Buddha clearly says no such thing. So here number second paragraph. If anyone says craving is self, that is why it is not tenable for anyone to say craving is self. Thus the I is not, this is the part I want to emphasize. Thus the I is not self, forms are not self, I consciousness is not self, I contact is not self, feeling is not self, craving is not self. All these 6 are not self. If you draw sort of six wheels or something, all these are not self. That is how I teach when I lead the retreats. I draw these circles and show you. Okay. Dhamma, could you please continue a little bit more?
If anyone says the ear is self, that is not tenable. The rise and fall of the ear are discerned, and since its rise and fall are discerned, it would follow. Myself rises and falls. That is why it is not tenable for anyone to say the ear is self. Thus the ear is not self. If anyone says sounds are self, your consciousness is self. Your contact is self. Feeling is self. Craving is self. That is why it is not tenable for anyone to say craving is self. Thus the ear is not self. Sounds are not self. Your consciousness is not self. Your contact is not self. Feeling is not self. Craving is not self.
Yeah, continue. So this is the same thing, right? Like repetition. Eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. So do you want to read? Yeah, let's read. Just read this.
Yeah. If anyone says the nose is self, that is not tenable. The rise and fall of the nose are discerned, and since its rise and fall are discerned, it would follow. Myself rises and falls. That is why it is not tenable for anyone to say the nose is self. Thus the nose is not self. If anyone says odors are self, nose consciousness is self. Nose contact is self. Feeling is self. Craving is self. That is why it is not tenable for anyone to say craving is not self. Thus the nose is not self. Odors are not self. Nose consciousness is not self. Nose contact is not self. Feeling is not self. Craving is not self. And if anyone says the tongue is self, that is not tenable. The rise and fall of the tongue are discerned, and since its rise and fall are discerned, it would follow. Myself rises and falls. That is why it is not tenable for anyone to say the tongue is self. Thus the tongue is not self. If anyone says flavors are self, tongue consciousness is self, tongue contact is self, feeling is self, craving is self. That is why it is not tenable for anyone to say craving is self. Thus the tongue is not self, flavors are not self, tongue consciousness is not self, tongue contact is not self, feeling is not self, craving is not self.
Chola?
If says the body itself, that's not tenable. Rise and fall of the body are discerned, and since its rise and fall is discerned, it follows. Myself rises and falls. That is why it is not tenable for anyone to say the body is self. Thus the body is not self. If anyone says tangibles are self, body consciousness is self, body contact is self, feeling is self, craving is self, that is why it is not tenable for anyone to say craving is self. Thus the body is not self, tangibles are not self, body consciousness is not self, body contact is not self, feeling is not self, craving is not self. If anyone says the mind is self, that is not tenable. The rise and fall of the mind are discerned, and since its rise and fall are discerned, it would follow. Myself rises and falls. That is why it is not tenable for anyone to say the mind is self. Thus the mind is not self. If anyone says mind objects are self, mind consciousness is self, mind contact is self, feeling is self, craving is self, that is why it is not tenable for anyone to say craving is self. Thus the mind is not self, mind objects are not self, mind consciousness is not self, mind contact is not self, feeling is not self, craving is not self.
So now it is clear that according to this, now there is no such thing to be grasped as self in these 6 sets. So now the Buddha says the origination of perception, personality. Let's understand what the origination of personality. This is personality belief. Actually, this is what personality belief. So, Mangal.
Now, bhikkhus, this is the way leading to the origination of personality. One regards the I thus: this is mine, this I am, this is myself. One regards forms thus. One regards I consciousness thus. One regards I contact thus. One regards feeling thus. One regards craving thus. This is mine, this I am, this is myself.
This is how the personality arises. We think this, it is mine, it's me, oh, I am, myself. With that notion, we personalize. That is how personality arises. So whenever we think of ourselves, like now bhikkhus, the Buddha says, now bhikkhus, this is the way leading to the origination of personality. One regards the I thus: this is mine. We normally grasp as this is my I, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. To everything of the body, we think it's mine. Not only I, even the nail. This is mine. It's not others. This is mine. Even this little nail. This is mine. It's mine. As long as these are here within, we talk about it's mine. But once it's dropped, you don't say it's mine. You don't grasp it as mine. So this is mine, this I am, this is myself. This is how we normally think. That's what we call the flow. Just you floating on the river, right? You floating, just go. No understanding. We normally do. That is what is called go with the flow. Go with the flow. But Buddhism is against the flow. So we should understand that this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. When we understand that way, that is what is called go against it. Then only we can realize Dhamma, we can see true. That is what is called vipassana. If we understand that is what is called real vipassana. There is no such thing to be called vipassana meditation. Though the term is used today, it's very famous: vipassana meditation, vipassana centers, many vipassana things. Vipassana means you see these three things. You see the three characteristics. When you see the three characteristics, anicca, dukkha, anatta, together with this, you can understand that it is not mine. Since it is not mine, we are disenchanted. With that, we see that it is, since it is changing, we don't want to grasp it. That is how one understands impermanence. Okay, continue.
One regards the ear thus, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. One regards the nose thus, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. One regards the tongue thus, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. One regards the body thus, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. One regards the mind thus, this is mine, this I am, this is myself. One regards the mind objects thus. One regards mind consciousness thus. One regards mind contact thus. One regards feeling thus. One regards craving thus. This is mine, this I am, this is myself.
So that's how we grasp this. Whenever we grasp these six as mine, I am, myself, that is how personality arises. Then the Buddha teaches us the cessation of personality. Continue.
Now, bhikkhus, this is the way leading to the cessation of personality. One regards the I thus, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. One regards forms thus. One regards eye consciousness thus. One regards eye contact thus. One regards feeling thus. One regards craving thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself.
This is not mine. That is how one has to see. This I is not mine. That is why we used wording first and then to understand. This is not mine. This I is not mine. This not me. This not myself. Like that we have to understand the I, form, consciousness, contact, feeling, craving, all these things. We have to understand that there is no such thing to be grasped as mine or I am or myself. Yep, continue.
One regards the ear thus, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. One regards the nose thus, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. One regards the tongue thus, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. One regards the body thus, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. One regards the mind thus, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. One regards mind objects thus. One regards mind consciousness thus. One regards mind contact thus. One regards feeling thus. One regards craving thus. This is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself.
Now the underlying tendencies underline. They live, they sleep, they are underneath. That is why they are called underlying tendencies. Anusaya, the Pali term is anusaya. Okay, Jayanta.
Bhikkhus, dependent on the I and forms, I consciousness arises. The meeting of the three is contact. With contact as a condition, there arises a feeling felt as pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant. When one is touched by a pleasant feeling, if one delights in it, welcomes it, and remains holding to it, then the underlying tendency to lust lies within one. When one
now, wait a second. I want to explain a little bit. So now, the Buddha says, bhikkhus, dependent on the I and forms, I consciousness arises. The meeting of the three is contact. With contact as condition, there arises feeling. There arises feeling. Felt as pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant. These are the three types of feelings. When one is touched by a pleasant feeling, if one delights in it, welcomes it, and remains holding to it, then the underlying tendency to lust lies there within. That is what we talked about craving. That is one type of feeling. When we have pleasant feeling, we grasp it. Where we have, we welcome, we delight it, welcome, remains holding to it. So that is how underlying tendency to lust arises. Okay, continue.
When one is touched by a painful feeling, if one sorrows, grieves, and laments, weeps, beating one's breast, and becomes distraught, then the underlying tendency to aversion lies within one.
That is the other side, direct opposite of it, opposite of lust. So, when one is touched by a painful feeling, if one sorrows, grieves, and laments, beating one's breast and becomes distraught, then the underlying tendency to aversion lies within. That is the other side. And next, okay.
When one is touched by a neither painful nor pleasant feeling, if one does not understand as it actually is the origination, the disappearance, the gratification, the danger, and the escape in regard to that feeling, then the underlying tendency is to ignorance lies within one.
Okay, now here some people think that if you don't go to these two extremes, you are all right, because you are in the middle path. You are in the middle, middle path. If you avoid the two extremes, since you are in the middle, some people think that it is all right. It is neutral. The Buddha says, when one is touched by a neither painful nor pleasant feeling, if one does not understand, that is the problem. As he can't understand, he has no right understanding, he has no mindfulness. Since no mindfulness, no right understanding, what happens? As it actually is, he does not know, he can't understand. As it is means what is going on there on the object, the change in nature of the object. That is what is called right understanding here. So it actually is the origination. He does not know the origination of it. Origination, disappearance, that is the cessation. Origination, cessation, arising, perishing. And then the gratification of it, and danger, and the escape. He does not know any one of these. That is why it is called ignorance. Now, in regard to that feeling, then the underlying tendency to ignorance lies within one. That is ignorance. He does not know anything of these five things. What are the five things? Origination, disappearance, gratification, danger, and escape. These are the five things to be understood of the object. Okay, continue.
Bhikkhus, that one shall here and now make an end of suffering without abandoning the underlying tendency to lust for pleasant feeling, without abolishing the underlying tendency to aversion towards painful feeling, without extirpating the underlying tendency to ignorance in regard to neither painful nor pleasant feeling, without abandoning ignorance and arousing true knowledge. This is impossible.
This is impossible. Without demolishing these three types of underlying tendencies. What are the three? Underlying tendencies to lust, to aversion, and ignorance. If not abolish, not abolish these three, attain reality, to understand reality is impossible. Attainment of enlightenment is impossible. That's the meaning. Okay, continue.
Bhikkhus, dependent on the ear and sounds, ear consciousness arises. Dependent on the mind and mind object, mind consciousness arises. The meaning of the three is contact. With contact as a condition, there arises a feeling felt as pleasant or painful, or neither pleasant or painful nor pleasant. Bhikkhus, that one should here and now make an end of suffering without abandoning the underlying tendency to lust for pleasant feelings, without abandoning ignorance and arousing true knowledge. This is impossible.
That is without abolition of those things, it is impossible. It's understood. Continue. Now the abandonment of the underlying tendencies.
Bhikkhus, dependent on the I and forms, I consciousness arises. The meaning of the three is contact. With contact as a condition, there arises a feeling felt as pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant. When one is touched by a pleasant feeling, if one does not delight in it, welcome it, and remain holding to it, then the underlying tendency to lust does not lie within one. When one is touched by a painful feeling, if one does not sorrow, grieve, and lament, does not weep, beating one's breast and becoming distraught, then the underlying tendency to aversion does not lie within one. When one is touched by neither painful nor pleasant feeling, if one understands as it actually is the origination, the disappearance, the gratification, the danger, and the escape in regards to that feeling, then the underlying tendency to ignorance does not lie within one. Bhikkhus, that one shall here and now make an end of suffering by abandoning the underlying tendency to lust for pleasant feeling, by abolishing the underlying tendency to aversion towards painful feeling, by extirpating the underlying tendency to ignorance in regard to neither painful nor pleasant feeling, by abandoning ignorance and arousing true knowledge. This is possible.
That's clear, right? Continue.
Bhikkhus, dependent on the ear and sounds, ear consciousness arises, etc. Dependent on the mind and mind objects, mind consciousness arises. The meaning of the three is contact. With contact as a condition, there arises a feeling felt as pleasant or painful, or neither painful nor pleasant. Bhikkhus, that one shall here and now make an end of suffering by abandoning the underlying tendency to lust for pleasant feelings, by abandoning ignorance and arousing true knowledge. This is possible.
Yeah, clear, right? Okay. Liberation.
Seeing thus, Bhikkhus, a well-taught noble disciple becomes disenchanted with the eye, disenchanted with forms, disenchanted with eye consciousness, disenchanted with eye contact, disenchanted with feeling, disenchanted with craving. He becomes disenchanted with the ear. He becomes disenchanted with the nose. He becomes disenchanted with the tongue. He becomes disenchanted with the body. He becomes disenchanted with the mind, disenchanted with mind objects, disenchanted with mind consciousness, disenchanted with mind contact, disenchanted with feeling, disenchanted with craving.
What do you mean by disenchantment? Disenchanted. How can you explain it? Disenchanting.
No, you said disinterested? But another way to say
Why?
It depends. I mean, you could read it as being beguiled, that you're tricked by it, that enchantment in the sense of being beguiled, and that you're no longer being tricked or by it.
Enchanted, it can also mean like you're obsessed with something. Like I'm really enchanted with golf. It means like I'm really obsessed with golf. I'm really caught up with golf.
You're not being swayed by it anymore. You're not being overcome by it.
Yes, you see the meaninglessness of it. That is what is disenchantment. You disenchant with it because you don't see any meaning using, no point using it or having it. That the Pali term is nibbida. You are sometimes it is translated as I think revulsion, which is not correct. Revulsion is not correct. Revulsion, you have repulsion, you have sort of resentment. There is no resentment here, but understanding. With understanding, you turn away. That's how it is said in the Dhammapada. Sabbe sankhara anicchati yada panyaya passati ata nibbindati dukkhe. You see the term nibbindati dukkhe. Nibbinda is there. Sabbe sankhara anicca. When you meditate, when you practice further, practice again and again, we practice, then you can understand sabbe sankhara, whatever is conditioned, all conditioned things, whatever is depend on other things. Sabbe sankhara anicca, impermanent. All conditioned things are impermanent. Sabbe sankhara aniccati yada panyaya passati. When one sees it through wisdom, you see it through wisdom, that is your insight, that is your vipassana. When you practice, develop your mind, you see that it is changing. No point grasping now. That is your disenchantment. You do not enchant it. Yada panyaya passati ata nibbindati dukkhe. There you turns away from suffering. Turns away from suffering. That's turning away is because of disenchantment. Turning away. Ata nibbindati dukkhe. Esa maggo visuddhya. This is the path to purity. That is how it is said in the Dhammapada. So that is disenchantment. Okay, continue.
Being disenchanted, he becomes dispassionate. Through dispassion, his mind is liberated. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge. It is liberated. He understands. Birth is destroyed. The holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being.
Now, here you see, it is said, it is liberated. It is liberated, not a person. Not the person here. When it is now being disenchanted, he becomes dispassionate. To dispassion, his mind is liberated. You see, it is the mind liberated, not the person. There is no more person, whether the man or woman, no such things. When you are liberated, it's a liberated mind. Mind is liberated. When it is liberated, there comes the knowledge, it is liberated. What is liberated? Mind is liberated. He understands birth is destroyed. No more birth. Birth is destroyed. The holy life has been lived. Holy life here means the path, Noble Eightfold Path. Holy life has been lived. What had to be done has been done. There is no more coming to any state of being. No more becoming. No more becoming. His samsaric journey is cut off. Okay, the last.
That is what the Blessed One said. The bhikkhus were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. Now, while this discourse was being spoken, through not clinging, the minds of 60 bhikkhus were liberated from the taint.
That is what happened. 60 bhikkhus, their minds, liberated their minds. They all attain enlightenment. So that is what the Buddha said. Let's all understand this and let's try to be so. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.